So we're going live once a month, and just to kind of get the word out that we're here, and hopefully we'll get some new people coming, right? But tonight, typically at this point, we'd be talking about inventory, but we didn't want to go live with inventory right off the bat. If you haven't done, steps 1, 2, and 3, we don't want to throw you right into 4. So tonight we're going to talk about burnout and relapse. They're very similar. Burnout typically is referring to if you are burnt out just on work or life or whatever, and relapse is usually when you've relapsed from a substance abuse, but really they're very similar in how it plays out and how it happens in our lives. So some of this may apply to you and some of it may not. So if I'm using the word burnout or relapse interchangeably, just try to apply what applies to you, okay? I gave you handouts. These handouts are something that I would rather you not fill out while I'm teaching this lesson, because you're really going to need to think about these things. It took me like a week or 2 to even be able to fill out the first couple of questions, because I really just didn't know what to write down, and I really had to think about it. So I would, if I was you, I'd take it home. If you think of something and you're like, I need to write that down right now because it's fresh on my mind, and I'm going to forget if I don't, then obviously write it down. But I don't want you to be so busy writing that you're not listening. So take it home, put it on your fridge, and be intentional about filling it out as things come up, okay? So I don't have like a flowery introduction to this. I'm just going to get right into it, okay? Life itself can be very heavy, and chances are if you're here at H7 Recovery that you've crashed and burned at some point in life, right? That's kind of why we're here. Recovery can also be very heavy. That's why Ria said, we need to celebrate the wins, because it's not easy. And so we need to keep it balanced, and we need to have fun, and we need to celebrate. If this was a competition, I would probably win at being the world's worst at being too serious, okay? Not that it's a competition, but if it was, I would probably win. So far, this group, everybody basically, I think, that's here, I think we have some new ones, so welcome. But we have already gone through steps 1 through 3, and I'll recap those a little bit as we go along. So next week, we're going to be embarking on some deep soul searching, fessing up to our part in the chaos of our lives, and making amends with those that we have hurt. So this step, which is what we call the inventory step, is where many let pride, fear, or burnout or relapse take over and they quit. So we don't want anybody to quit once they get to that point. So we're going to try to get ahead of that tonight and talk about some things that are practical and spiritual, so that you do not crash and burn during this process, because we want you to be successful. The 12 steps that we practice here at H7 are based on biblical principles. In these steps, we find instructions from God of how to live a peaceful, healthy, and happy life. They are so simple, but yet they are so hard, because they go against our human nature. And they don't tell us all of the whys. As humans, we want to know all the whys. We're so bad that we want to know what type of flu we have. Do I have type A or type B or type C? Because we want to know the whys, because we feel like we're in more control if we know all the whys. So I don't know why my body's wigging out today, but I'm like, okay, Lord, I get to practice just trusting you without knowing all the reasons why things are happening or why I feel the way I feel. So at this phase in recovery, we have come to a place where our pain is bigger than our frustration, our fears, and our whys. We have come to a place where we are willing to admit that we have been in denial, that we've made a mess of our lives, and that we are powerless to change without Jesus Christ in the center of it. Some things we'll never have an answer to, and some things God is going to reveal to you as we go along. I know He has with me a lot, so just trust the process. Don't get ahead of God. He's going to show you, if you're working the steps and you're really trying, He's going to show you things that you need to know in order to recover. The first part that we need to look out for burnout or relapse is to refuel. Find something healthy that truly shifts your focus and refills you. You cannot make it through recovery if you don't learn balance. So you guys, your questions there, I'm going to read them quickly. These are answers that you'll need to be answering, like I said, as the week goes on. What are some healthy activities that fill you back up? What activities drain you and keep you locked in a bad mood? What changes can you make to live your life with more things that fill you up? How often do you take the time to pause and be refilled? And like I mentioned, it was hard for me to answer even that first group of questions. I was like, what refills me? And I wrote some things down finally. But then as I was looking at it, was like, well, yeah, those all refill me, but how often do I really stop and do them? So I think we all know it makes us feel good, and yet do we do it? Do we actually refill? We can get really caught up in the rigors of life and recovery where it's like it's all serious and we don't take the time to refill, and then before you know it, you're just like falling apart and you don't really know why. The second part here that we're going to look at is embrace your personal limits. Stop comparing your endurance and your journey with others. Learn what triggers you and have a plan of how to come back to reality when you are triggered. You are not a failure or a worthless person for having limits. Your limitations are proof that you are not God. That's a hard one for me because I don't want to have any limitations. I want to have it all together. I'm just being honest. If we let him bring us back to step 2 and realize that I am not God, and I admit that I am powerless to control my tendencies to do the wrong thing, and that my life is unmanageable without him, then we have to redo this step, okay? You're going to have to tell yourself when things come up, because just because you're doing recovery doesn't mean that things aren't going to pop up, that life is just going to suddenly be easy. Things are going to come up that trigger you, that upset you, and you're going to have to pause and say, I admit that I'm not God. I admit that I'm powerless without him. And what do I need to do to stay connected to him through this trial? So we need to clearly define what our limitations are based off of our unique makeups, not someone else's, no matter how successful they are, okay? So just because you see somebody that's extremely successful, it doesn't mean that you're made to do everything exactly like they do. I set my expectations really, really high. I look at people that are really, really good and awesome and great in my eyes, and I'm like, well, if I do everything they do, then I'll be fine. But I'm finding out that what works for them doesn't necessarily work for me, and it's not necessarily what God intends for me to do. So don't pattern your life after a successful person. Pattern your life off of God and what you and him come to. These are the limitations in my life that I need to have in place to stay healthy and sane. When we do this, something amazing happens. God's power takes over when ours runs out. And I love the serenity prayer because it's a simple little prayer, but it's so profound. Does anybody know the serenity prayer by heart? Anybody? Half of it? Okay, if you know it, you can say it with me. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. When we refuse to embrace personal limits, we are relying on self and not on God. The next question here is, what pressures are being put on myself or others to blow past my limits? Here's an example of pressure that you might be putting on yourself or feel like it's put on you by others. Feeling the need to go to events that are not healthy for your recovery. Going to friends and families events, holiday events can be hard and trigger some. We feel obligated to attend for fear of being misunderstood or rejected. If you must go to an event, have some solid, reliable plans before you go. Now, see, we have all these plans of how we're going to get better, but we don't have solid, reliable plans of what we're going to do if something happens, if we're triggered by something. What are you going to do if you go and you're offered something that you know would be detrimental to your recovery? You have to get like a bulldog grip on this and say, nope, I've been there before, come too far, not going there again. And you have to have some very reliable things that you can do, whether it be calling a friend and saying, hey, I was offered this, I'm very tempted, or if it's you have issues with anger, you're flying off the handle and you're throwing things all over the house, what are you going to do in that moment? You know, you got to have some things that are going to bring you back down. So let's see. Remember that the people that really love you and the people that want what's best for you will eventually come around and support your recovery, especially if they see that change is happening in you. So if you feel like nobody understands, the people that you usually hang out with, they don't understand what you're doing, they don't understand why you're separating yourself from them, just keep doing what you're supposed to be doing. And the people that really have your back and that really love you are going to come around and say, you know what, I do see a change in you and I support you. Okay? The next question on your sheet will be, how would my life look different a year from now if I embraced the limits that God has placed on me? And am I able to say no when necessary? So this, are you able to say no, is going to be putting boundaries in place. Sometimes boundaries can be very difficult, but it's a necessary skill to learn without being hateful, but it's really just because you're not willing to jeopardize your mental health, your spiritual health, or your physical health. It has to be that important to you that you're like, I'm not willing to go back there, so I'm going to put some boundaries in place. The next question is, what things do I need to trust God with when I have to set tough boundaries in place or take a rest? The next thing we're going to look at is getting ahead of the crash or relapse or burnout. After doing intense soul searching, which we'll be doing soon, taking inventory, we're going to be having some hard conversations, making amends, plus the pressure of just everyday life. We must be intentional to rest. If we can't quite reach the proper threshold of recovery before having to run back into the fray, left unchecked, the combined nature of stressors will compound, and lead to an ugly crash. Matthew 11:28-30. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Pump the brakes. Ask for help. Let your accountability person know how you are feeling. Talk to God about it. Communicate with your spouse or your family or whoever's close to you what's going on with you, or talk to a therapist. Basically, here it is. Again, don't be self-reliant. Talk to somebody. Talk to God, but talk to a person too. Don't try to be self-reliant. Be protective when life's problems show up in relationships. Work, school, finances, etc. Don't let things build. If you have a situation that is bothering you, but you continue to shove it down, it will continue to fester and grow if you do not take action to solve or deal with this problem. Be willing to have the hard conversations. Notice when you are making a lot of excuses. Excuses are a clear indication that something is not quite right. Usually if you're making excuses, you're probably wrong. Just saying. Where my water went. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is isolation, and this is a big one. I think we all find ourselves guilty of this when we're going through something. Okay, in isolation, especially when you're in recovery, you can find yourself very frustrated, even with the good and positive influence in your life. Coming up with reasons to have an issue with your sponsor, with your church family, with family members who have always supported you, etc. And they all have your best interest at heart. But most importantly, if you can separate from positive influences, it won't be long and you will reject the source of all your power, which is Jesus Christ. Your problems or addictions are like a lion that wants to hunt you down, get you isolated and vulnerable, and then devour you. If you find yourself wanting to distance yourself, you're opening yourself up for being very vulnerable to the enemy when you isolate yourself. And when you're isolating yourself, this is a time that you really need to look at yourself. Look beyond the surface and really look at yourself, because we cannot dictate what others do, but we need to look at what we're doing. So is there something that's triggering you? Is there resentment that you're holding on to? I had an experience where there was this woman, I don't know if I've told this or not, there was this woman that I just could not stand, and I didn't know why I couldn't stand her. And one day I was in church and I looked over and the Lord spoke to me and he said, the reason that you can't stand her is because she reminds you of the person that wounded you very deeply. So it was not because it was her at all. It was because her personality reminded me of the person that wounded me very deeply. So sometimes it's not the person at all. So just be careful and look past. Just don't isolate yourself. Ultimately, don't isolate yourself. It's the big thing here. Your support group is not going to be perfect, but neither am I. When you find yourself wanting to separate yourself from your support, and not just one person, but all your support, you can guarantee that there's a bigger issue at work. Again, we must repeat step 1 and make sure that we aren't in denial about our own bad behavior, attitude, and resentments, and admit again that I am powerless to fix or heal myself. I need the people that God gave me, and I need Him. When I was dealing with postpartum depression, I did a lot of things wrong, but there's one thing that I did right, and that was that and it was just the wisdom of God, I believe. I reached out to several people, and when I was having a bad day, I let them know that I'm not okay and I need you to pray. And I had to have that because I was afraid that if I didn't tell somebody that I was going to lose my mind and that I was going to do something that ultimately would be detrimental to me or to my child. And so you need to let somebody know what's going on. The next question here is, ask yourself, how effectively am I bouncing back from the pressure and the fatigue of life and recovery? Does a little R&R fix you up, or do you have to borrow energy from tomorrow for today's tasks? Am I continually carrying fatigue into the next task? Don't feel like just because, like here, we're going to teach a different lesson every week. So if you feel like for me, I still feel like I'm learning this whole powerlessness thing. So it's something that I have to do over and over and over. And so even though we're moving into another step next week, you might still be needing to look over this for a while, and that's okay. Don't try to rush through it. Get as much as you can from each lesson. And we'll go through it again, and you're going to get another piece every time we go through it. I still am, and I've been doing it for quite a while. I don't even know how many times I've been through the 12 steps. Probably, I don't know, at least probably 6. I don't know. It's been a bunch. And so, and every time I go through it, I find more, or I learn more, or I'm like, man, I wish I would have learned that last time because it would have saved me a lot of trouble. But you really just can't really retain things until you get to a certain point. Let's see. So come to the meetings and take a little bit of extra time working on the steps that really, really apply to you, and don't feel like it's a race. We're not racing one another. We're not comparing ourselves to one another's journey. Okay, this is just a practical thing, and we'll learn more about this later, but listen to your body. Your emotional struggles aren't just in your head, but in your body as well. And we'll learn more about the mind-body connection in some of the other steps. Here's some more questions for you. Where am I on the reactive-proactive spectrum? Am I able to pause, think, feel, and then choose, or am I just flying by the seat of my pants and reacting to every situation? Where are there opportunities for improvement in my weekly schedule? What's the most important thing that I do during this time of recovery, and am I putting that first? How could I better communicate my needs and expectations to the people closest to me as they go down this journey with me? So remember, when you go on recovery, the people that live with you have to put up with you too. So when you get angry with them because they're just not reading your mind, realize that they can't read your mind. They don't know what's going on. So try to communicate what's going on to the best of your ability so that they can support you, so that they can pray for you, so they can love you. Because recovery is not just hard on us, it's hard on the people that are closest to us too. These are some questions that you might not know the answer to, but I guarantee you that you will once we go through the inventory steps. What are your warning signs? What are your triggers? What are your behaviors? Do you tend to isolate yourself from people? Do you have irrational, bombarding thoughts? Do you tend to revert to old friends that will enable your habit or behavior? The recovery process is hard. It is, but it's a productive thing. It's not like the way we've been living where it's the same cycle over and over, and ultimately it leads to spiritual death and sometimes even physical death. So, your old way of living was hard in a lot of ways, but definitely wasn't productive. And this is going to be hard too, but it's productive because it's growth and you get better. So we must remind ourselves of steps 1, 2, and 3. I am powerless over my issues and things have become unmanageable. 2, Jesus Christ died on the cross for me. He thought I was worth saving, and he is the only one that can restore me to sanity. 3, I surrender. We make a decision to turn our lives and our will over to the care of God. This is a big one, guys. Self-reliance. It's probably the worst one, so we're just getting deeper and deeper as we go here. In self-reliance, this is where denial raises its ugly head. This one usually happens after you've had a good run. It's after you've done recovery for a while and you're doing pretty good, and you're like, life is good now. You forget how bad it really was, how bad the situation was, how horrible you felt, how unhealthy you were. You forget how bad it felt because now you feel pretty good. So you start to pick up the same old habits just a little bit, maybe even without noticing it. Life is good, we think. I can handle this. I'm stronger now. So for those recovering from substance abuse, you may start to reminisce even about the good times you had in addiction, the parties that you went to, the people that you had good laughs with, and forget how truly terrible it was and what made you buckle down and get to recovery in the first place. Again, this is an example of leaning on your own strength and forgetting that in yourself you are powerless. If you've had these types of thoughts, then you are already walking back. You're already actively walking back into your addiction if you're reminiscing about how good it was. That's a big warning signal. Be careful that you don't get over one addiction just to pick up another substance and get addicted to something new. Some think that if they don't go back to their old substance of choice that they'll be fine, but that is not true. It won't matter what habit you pick up, it's going to lead to the same destination. If we aren't careful, when we feel good, we think that we can make it without the safeguards because I'm better now and I can rely on myself. We don't actually say that, but it's very, very obvious in our behaviors that we're doing that. What we really need here is the gift of meekness. The gift of meekness, the true biblical definition of meekness, is an inner strength that comes from putting God first, knowing that God is in control, and willingly yielding our plans, agendas, and ambitions to Him. Does that not sound like our steps? That's true meekness. Meekness doesn't mean that you act like you're worthless or, beat yourself or abuse yourself or put yourself down. That's not meekness. Meekness is relying on God and not relying on yourself. Self-reliance also comes in the form of trying to figure everything out and becoming your own therapist or psychiatrist. This is where I'm very guilty. Very guilty. We'll get into that later. All right, but then there's other people that are opposite of me and everything's good, so you get lazy and you stop, actively pursuing the steps. You stop coming to meetings, you stop journaling, you stop praying, you stop doing all the things that keep you grounded. So there's two coins. There's the overachiever, which is me, hi, and then there's the lazy. So we have to remember that we need to do these steps until they become us, like they become your way of living. Let's see. All right, we're going to talk about what? Hi, it's me. Now we're going to talk about worthlessness and shame. This can also cause you to burn out or relapse. In worthlessness and shame, you start to reject your recovery and go backwards. This could very well be a form of self-hatred. You see people you love still active in their addiction, and maybe you feel like you don't even deserve to be sober or free. It's hard to be separate from the people that you were once close to. Loneliness sets in, and it's almost like you're having this identity crisis. You don't know the old you, and you don't recognize the new person that you are becoming either. Your identity was once all wrapped up in your hurt habit or hang-up. In my case, my identity was wrapped up in fear, anxiety, not being able to do things, and I claimed it as my personality, and it wasn't. It was hurt. But I knew myself as the control freak, and I knew myself as the anxiety dependent. I only knew the introverted person that isolated from everybody, the person that felt worthless and had to prove to the world and to herself that she wasn't worthless. So I'm speaking for me. There has definitely been times in this recovery process where I look at myself and I'm like, I don't know the old Erica anymore. But I don't know this new Erica either, because I'm still trying to learn what God intended me to be originally without all the stuff. The stuff that I lived with for, I don't know, 25 years probably. So give yourself time to get to know the real you without the clutter. It's kind of like your identity. You saw yourself, if you want to think of something tangible that you can see, like a piece of glass that's got mud all smeared all over it and you can't clearly see through it. And as the mud gets wiped away, you start to see very clearly who you are, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the true you that God always intended you to be before all of the hurt and the trauma and the substance abuse. But discomfort doesn't mean destruction, and this is something that I've had to learn, and I'm still trying to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Just because you feel uncomfortable, just because you're emotional because you're dealing with stuff, you're dredging stuff up, doesn't mean that you're being destroyed. God is not in the business of destroying his children. So just because you feel cuckoo doesn't mean that you're losing your mind. It really doesn't. It just means that there's some work that's happening. You can think of it too as has anybody, you don't have to answer this, I'll just say it, like a boil or a spider bite or anything like that, and it gets really infected and full of pus. And when you're having to treat that, you squeeze, you have to lance it, you have to cut it open. So this is really what recovery is like, seriously. You cut it open, and then you have to squeeze all that nastiness out, all that pus, all that blood, all that nastiness, and it hurts so bad. It hurts really, really, really bad, okay? So all that gets pulled out, and then you have this empty hole, and you're like, okay, what now? There's nothing there now, so what am I? Who am I? And then you have to allow God to sew it back up and let it truly heal. That's really, really, truly how it is. So get comfortable for a little while living with the uncomfortable. It's going to be worth it. And you just have to be willing to say, yes, I'm going to go through this and it's going to be okay. You're learning a new way of thinking, a new way of feeling, and a new way of choosing. So sometimes we have to pause when we want to react the way we did in the past. And we have to say, that's the old me, but I don't do that anymore. I'm not going to react that way anymore. Like I said earlier, we're going to be faced with trials and circumstances and triggers. So pause, examine your thoughts, examine your feelings. Then choose based on the steps that you've already learned, the tools that you already have, and be very intentional. Find out what works best for you and be reminded of the tools and the steps until they become more a part of your nature. So now I'm going to tell you guys a story, and this is hard because it's pretty fresh. I was in a place a couple weeks ago, probably 2-3 weeks ago, where I was told to slow down, and it made me so angry. Seriously, I was furious, like furious. But it's actually a lesson that the Lord's been trying to teach me for several years, and it's like I thought that I had a hang of it. I thought I had better balance, and I do, but it's not where he wants me to be. And so I was told to slow down, and the reason is, and I hope you guys can learn from me, and this is why I'm going to share this with you. Don't be like me, okay? I got so tied up in the inventory process, and I literally typed up all my behaviors, and I put them under categories. So I put codependency, and then I wrote down all my things that would fit under codependency. Then I put all my things that fit under control, all my things that fit under fear, anxiety, depression, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I could see myself in black and white. I was not celebrating the wins. I was only looking at the bad. And that is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for depression. It's a recipe for shame and worthlessness. And really, I was trying to figure everything out. I wanted to know why I was feeling this way, what's it coming, where is it coming from, how can I fix it? And so ultimately I was self-reliant again. So when we went through and we were doing the lesson on powerlessness, it like hit me right between the eyes, and I'm like, but I want to be the boss. Seriously, okay? So I do, I want to be the boss. And the Lord's like, you're not the boss, I'm the boss. So
it's okay.
yeah. So, okay. But also, this is not just me being like, that's pretty bad. Like, I just want to be the boss. Yeah, that's pretty bad. But this part's just kind of sad. This part is, I think that part of me was that I was afraid because God has redeemed me and He has set me free and He has delivered me from anxiety attacks. And I have not had an anxiety attack for 1.5 years still. But when this was going down, I was this close, guys. I was so close to having an anxiety attack. And I was like, nope, I am not going back there again. So I had to pause and I had to ground myself again because it wasn't worth it. I didn't want to go back there. But I think that me being so hyper-focused and trying to figure everything out and do everything just right, the reason I got angry is because I was like, okay, here I am doing everything right, everything right, and I'm being told that I'm doing it wrong. And I was like, well, what's the point of doing it if I'm doing it wrong? I don't know if anybody ever feels that way. But it was like, I got to do all this stuff, and then I'm told that it's wrong, so why even try because it's wrong anyway, okay? So that was a big part of it too, which is just pride and control once again. But the other part of it was I was afraid that if I didn't do X, Y, and Z, that I was going to lose it, that I was going to lose what God already freely gave me. So you see how quick we are to negate God's grace and His mercy and His sovereignty? We don't have to earn His love. And He loves us when we're bad and when we're good, when we're doing poorly or we're doing really, really well. And the thing He also shared with me during this past couple weeks is when you feel that feeling of worthlessness, you can hold your head up high and you can say, I am not worthless. I am literally worth it all because God paid it all for me. He paid it all. He literally did. He bled, He died, He paid it all for me. So when I feel worthless now, I stand up and I really do say, not worthless, worth it all. Because Jesus said that I was worth it all when He died for me. So, like I said, we want tidy explanations for everything. We try to earn God's love. We try to earn other people's love. We try to earn everything that we freely have. And we really mess ourselves up when we do that. But again, we're not God. We can't control everything. And He gave us these things for free. It's free, yes, but we do have to put in the work, especially when we've made a big mess of our lives. Recovery is for you. It's God's love and His plans to bring you back out to what He intended you to be. So once we recognize our warning signs, it's easy to see relapse or burnout coming on. But you must be willing to look at yourself. You must be willing to be honest with God and with another person. You can get ahead of relapse and burnout by making small changes. Never underestimate the small changes. Being perfect is not something that we can attain. So it's not perfection that we need to attain. If anything, we are meant to embrace the imperfection of this journey, to rest in the love of God because He is for you and recovery is for you. You don't have to earn it. You just have to be willing to learn how to do life the way God intended you to do life. And then I'm going to end with another little story that happened to me recently too, because God's just telling me all kinds of things. A couple weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, we were working on redoing my son's room, and I was just like over the moon in love with him, like, weird, like, he's so cute, and he's 7, and I haven't thought he's so cute since he was a little baby. And I was like, he's so cute, and everything he does is so cute. And it was like, even his little lisp is cute, and even though he can't make his breakfast. It's so cute. And it was like God was letting me feel that deep, deep love for him because, and then he spoke to me and he said, that's how I love my children. You're not perfect and you have your little lisp and you can't do X, Y, and Z because you have all these issues, but I love you and I think you're fantastic. I made you and you were made in my image and I think you're great. So don't be so hard on yourself when you don't get everything right. You're still growing. So be merciful and patient with yourself. And that's what he told me. And I was like, okay, so I'm still growing and it's okay. I don't have to know everything yet. And that's okay. Isaiah 41:10, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Psalms 86:5. You, Lord, are forgiving and good, abounding in love to all who call you. So once again, God is not in the business of destroying his children. We are not worthless. Just because you had failures or setbacks or because you're not getting all the steps right now and you're not, where you want to be, it doesn't mean that you're a failure or that you're worthless or that God doesn't love you. And you don't have to know all the answers. It's better to see God and to really know him and to see him. That's what we need to strive for, to know him. Not to know all the whys of why did this happen, why did that happen, why do I feel so horrible. No, we just look at God. When you look at God, it makes it easier to go down this journey. It's the only way to go through this journey is to look at God. So I'm done. Thank you guys for listening.